place in which I now lived was not the place I loved. When it's only a marriage of convenience with the landscape, there's no reciprocal intimacy. Whereas a cherished place calls us to physical proximity in a creative relationship sustained and nourished by community involvement. I sought guidance from and respected Indigenous teachers because, having loved my natal island, I knew about attachment to place and how central country is to a sense of identity and belonging. And then I just said that over many years as the Lakes apprentice, my relationship to the ecology of Lake Clifton, which is what I was writing about, which is an area of profound cultural and ecological significance, deepened. And as I recorded its impact, the patterns and particularities and living history of this coastal wetland began to write me home. So I'm quite excited now because I want to write about the Phoenicians in Malta, BC. That's my next project, so I'm going even further back. But I just will say this, they were quite extraordinary people. They, in 3,000 years, and it was only the last 200 years where they ever, and only a small section of it from Carthage, ever fought. They refused to arm or to spend any of their economy on fighting. And they worshipped creation. So I'm hoping this will be very relevant to the world to come if we last that long.
I go back to my experience as an interpreter and as somebody who knows quite a few languages. I used to, when I traveled, I used to love to speak foreign languages. The languages allowed me to have a different persona. I could be French and argumentative, I could be expansive speaking Italian, I could be whining speaking Portuguese, and so on. The older I get, the more I think that my identity is in the English language. When I speak something else, I don't quite feel myself. And so I think that identity is also language.
Do you think that identity is language? No, I think identity is a lot more than language. I think identity is, well, it's your culture, it's what you do, how you live. Language is part of it, a big part of it, but not everything.
I guess, yeah, I think that's right, but I think it's part of your identity because that's how we make our own that's how we think our stories. That we use language to think our own story, to tell our own story to ourselves and to others, I suppose. So yeah.
I know we're going to have a discussion, but the writers earlier on who write in Maltese, I would like to hear from you in the discussion if it really is a wrench for you to write in English. I mean, there are all the Anglo-Indian writers, you know, Salman Rushdie and Rohan Mistry, and I don't think that well, I'm not sure that they don't have some kind of inner conflict. Salman Rushdie, no, because he was educated in England, but Rohan Mistry, no. He writes in English, but I think he lives in India. So does it feel to you, writing in English, that you're one remove and a further removed from the things you're writing about? But I guess we'll come to that in the discussion.
I would think that for, I don't know, my own comment on that is that it may not feel like that at all, you know. I mean, whereas for many people, Maltese is the language of first expression. For many people in Malta, it can actually be English. And when it comes to writing rather than speaking, it's very likely to be English rather than Maltese. You know, I mean, I am not a writer, but I would find it hard, I think, to if I were to write, I would find it extremely hard to write in Maltese. I don't know how far, would you like to comment?
Well, it's interesting because in Australia, I get a chance once a year at the multicultural poetry evening during the poetry festival. People suddenly remember I'm Maltese, and so I spoke about Zaragoza, which is where my grandfather comes from, and showed some slides, and I showed the first poem that was ever found written down in Malta that was half written in Arabic and half in Maltese. I put a slide up. And I sent a poem of mine to an old schoolmate here, Anna Stivala, and I attempted, it was quite long, and I attempted to translate it, and she tidied up the translation considerably. And so I read it, and I read the English version and the Maltese version. And it was really built around the place names of the coast in Gotha, which are fantastic. They're wonderful place names. There's a rock called the Chin of the Man Who Sits Fishing. You know, I mean, it's wonderful. And people in Australia are so fascinated by Maltese. They so respect it. They can't get to know enough. And I used to do a meditation evening in church, and a few of us spoke in different languages, as you were saying, French, Spanish, and Hindi. And we translated just one short chant into Maltese, and so I would sing that in Maltese. And I really must say that in the 30 years away, I've appreciated Maltese much more. I can read it more fluently now and speak it and listen to it on television. So it was the old, either the familiarity breeds contempt, or I hadn't been here through the reclamation of Maltese that you are obviously the benefactors of, and I'm quite envious that you have that as part of your writing arsenal. It's wonderful.
Could I just say one thing? Isabel Allende, when she wrote her books in Spanish, they're 100 times better than her books in English. That's all I can say. And she said something rather lovely about being in exile. When they were driven out of Chile, she said she took a bag full of Chilean soil, and when she got to her place of exile, she put the soil in a pot and has, over the years, continued to grow flowers. And she says every year the flowers become more and more beautiful, grown in this Chilean soil. I think that's a rather lovely image of the exile.
I think that would be a good idea for us to do, but Australia. We'll never get past quarantine. I think you might
sense soil.
I wonder whether I mean, because it's very important, yes, to protect the Maltese language, but have you ever considered the problems of the size of the language, the size of Maltese, the size of English? How does that impact on your choice? I mean, could you write in Maltese?
I wish I could. I think it's such an expressive language, and also because I did for a few years I worked with a group who were studying the Old Gospels, and so we were studying a bit of the original Aramaic, and to think that it is so close, and you know the true Maltese words, not the bastardized ones, are so close to an original language. I don't think it matters. I mean, perfume comes in tiny bottles when it's very precious.
Yes, I would love to be able to write. I do write in Maltese, but I don't think I have enough vocabulary. I don't think I have enough words. You know, I have more words in English now than I have in Maltese. You know, I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't speak Maltese either. I've got my aunt's 1932 Maltese grammar, which has wonderful things. If tomorrow is sunny, the washerwoman will be very happy, and things like that. That's my level of Maltese. But I do think it's so important to continue writing in Maltese to enrich the language. You would be inventing vocabulary, inventing expressions, inventing imagery. You can't let that go. I think it's really important.
I think we can stop this.